Just going back to your time at Rangers and specifically the Champions League campaign there, just a bit of an insight into what did you learn, I guess, from that experience?
Bittersweet. Obviously, the sweet is that we qualified because we had to go through quite a difficult qualifying campaign. Yeah. And you see this year how difficult that was when you see like they played PSV again this year with a different outcome. And, you know, some would argue that this year's team's better. Some could argue that last year's team's better. Well, it doesn't really matter, but, you know, like to Cody Gakpo and them were in the side at the time. And on paper, they should really be getting through. PSV should be beating us. So I think that euphoria of that bit and the challenge, the tactical challenge there, and then you think you're getting somewhere because you qualify. But then when you realise, like, when you step into that environment and, you know, if there's one thing we could change, it would be something around that Champions League, about getting points in the Champions League. But at the same time, when you look at the group, you go actually... At that moment, you know, Ajax were an established Champions League club and had been in the semi-final only a few years ago, spending considerable money. I think at that time it was around, you have to spend around 120 million over 5 years consecutively to finish third. Right. So that gives you an idea of how much these clubs are spending. And then you have Liverpool, 3 finals in 5 years. You know, they don't need much of an introduction, even though they were a little bit off in Premier League terms last season. And then Napoli were arguably the most formed team.
It was the best Napoli side in the past 20 years and went on to win the league as well. So
you could say that without the World Cup break, they arguably would have been favourites to win the Champions League because at that time they were unbelievable. And I think the World Cup break actually killed them a little bit in terms of that momentum and rhythm. But when you're at a club like Rangers, all that goes out the window because you're a club that has to win, and I get that. All the fans wanted you to do was win. There was nothing ever about going there to perform. It was about winning, and we weren't able to do that. So that will always be a huge regret in terms of that part. Yeah. But then what you realise is like the levelness of some of this is unbelievable. So you go to Anfield, and just the way it's little things that you know, but it confirms for you. So like Jordan Henderson run the game. But he didn't run the game with what he did with the ball or without it. He did run the game by organising people. And when you speak to players afterwards that, you know, played at the Premier League level as well, by the way, and then they see that and they play against players like that, they go, actually, yeah, we can see what he does and what we can take from that, because he literally bossed the game without needing to touch the ball in many ways in terms of just organising those around him. So I think that was incredible seeing. You know, you go to some of the best grounds, which we were fortunate to do. You know, we went to some iconic places in terms of that. But those things you don't really think about in the moment. You don't, even now to a degree. I can't even remember too much about the stadiums and things because you just don't. You just focus on what the job is, so you don't get to experience it in that way. But when you look back on it and you think about the clubs you played, of course, there's an element of pride there. But it's hard to feel pride when the performances or the results were where the results were, although there were key moments in every game. Yeah. And everyone will say this, of course, but like I always go back to first home game, Napoli. We have 2 or 3 very good chances and should be ahead, and we're on top. Then we get the red card. Then they miss the pen. Then they have another pen, and they score to go 1-0. And with 6 minutes to go, it's still 1-0, and we got 10 men. And then 2 silly errors, give the ball away on the edge of our own box, and those teams punish you. And that's the difference. Yeah. Where you maybe get away with some of that stuff in the SPL, it was like, and the Liverpool game at home will always stand out because I think it was at 65 minutes, it was 1-1. We have a great chance, 2v1, and don't take it. Kanate slides in and wins it. They have almost the identical chance the other way. Firmino scores, and then they bring Salah, Robertson, Jota and Thiago off the bench. And I remember looking across and saying to Pep Linders, come on. Come on. But that's the kind of, that's the level of it. That's where you want to be, and that's where they want to be. That's where they need to be as a club. But it's always, when you look back at it now, you've almost got to go through the bad experience, being the first ones to get back in the Champions League, to allow them to continue to build, and hopefully in the next few years they will consistently qualify. Well, if they win the league this year, then they qualify. So that's a good start point. But hopefully they can do that consistently, because that gives you the level of it, but also the financial aspect of it. It's so important for Scottish clubs.
Yeah, definitely.
It's huge.
Anything post, sort of like you said, in the heat of the moment, you can't really take it all in. Everything's going by so fast. Anything on reflection that you think you've learned that you would do differently again, or
Yeah, it's the only one for me is, and I've always felt it anyway, but we probably adapted or tried to adapt to give the players a better chance to compete, or so we thought. Whereas, like, if I was to really be true to what I believe in, I would just go for it in the same way every game. Yeah. And that could have led to big defeats, but then we ended up with big defeats anyway so like Liverpool was our biggest one, and at home we went for it and went 1-0 up and was well in the game and doing okay, and then obviously within minutes it can just come crashing the other way. So I think it's hard to know exactly, because the bit when you try to change, you have to have a certain amount of players that can adapt to change in that way, and unless you're some of the bigger squads in the world, you don't really get that. So I think it's hard. Sometimes, and Rangers fans will hate me for saying it, they'll probably hammer me for saying it, but sometimes you have to accept where you are. And at that moment in time, we weren't at the same level as Liverpool in terms of the players that they had in their squad, the way the club had been in so many Champions Leagues consecutively and finals and competing at the top end. We just weren't at the same level as them. Does that mean we could have performed better? Yeah, of course we could have. And there'll always be some things around that. But would we still have lost games? Probably. And I can hear them now. They'll be like, defeatist mindset and all that. But sometimes it's just reality, right?
Yeah. Liverpool are not easy. You can't over Liverpool.
And the players gave everything.
It's
players level.
Players gave everything. Yeah. And what we also had, which you can't discount, is the number of injuries picked up from playing at that level. And they were injury sustained in games, not training. So you're asking, like Connor Goldson is one of the standouts for me. Been a real stalwart for Rangers. Top player, was really, really important to us. Got injured chasing Nunez in the Channel, Ibrox, because he had to do that maybe 6 or 7 times in half an hour, where he might do that twice in a game at most in the SPL on the weekend.
That's a great point, yeah.
So just those things that they're not usually expected to do at the intensity that they have to do them at can cause injury, because you're almost like, how do you're training players to play a Champions League game that's the opposite of what we get in the SPL. SPL, we are at 80% of the ball most weeks, except for when you play 1 or 2 sides. Yeah. Teams sit really deep against you, so that even the movement patterns, everything that they have to do, the mindset of how they see the game, and then all of a sudden you play against Liverpool, they win the ball, they turn you around, and you're running back towards your own goal every time you lose it. That is a very different game.
Used to a style of play.
Being able to cope with that is not easy. And so we ended up with 13 first-team players injured. And then they go, it's because of what you're doing in training. No, mate, because we didn't have enough time to train. We were literally recovering and playing again. It was condensed because of the World Cup, of course. Yeah. So we played every second, third day. That's what it was for us. So we didn't get the time to rest fully, get good work into them to go again. It was always trying to do it on the run, which is the nature of the beast, right? And that's why you're in those top tournaments.